Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kara. I've been learning Spanish since I was 13, and having lived in Spanish-speaking countries for the past 2 years, I think I am just about fluent in Spanish, or at least getting close. Today I'm going to give you 7 ways I knew I was becoming fluent in Spanish, and then 3 reasons why you shouldn't be afraid to call yourself fluent in Spanish or whatever language you may be learning. I mean, considering you're at least proficient in the language, of course. So let's begin with the first reason. The first way I knew I was becoming fluent in Spanish was when I started to think in Spanish. This first started happening to me, I think, in Honduras, but actually maybe it started happening in university when I was still learning Spanish, but I've definitely noticed it happens more often when I'm hearing and speaking Spanish more than English. So for example, here in the Dominican Republic, I might be thinking in Spanish more because I'm hearing it all the time, I'm speaking it all the time, and it's just constantly around me, so it can be easy to start thinking in Spanish and using Spanish words in my thoughts. So that was the first way I knew I was becoming fluent, when even my thoughts become in Spanish. I don't have to constantly translate things from English to Spanish, but rather I start thinking in Spanish. The second way I knew I was becoming more fluent is that it's harder to tune out. Many times in the past, especially when I first moved to Honduras, I would find myself not realizing someone was talking to me because they were talking in Spanish and I could just tune it out easily. So when the conversation turned to me, for example, and they didn't use my name, maybe I didn't catch what they said because I didn't realize they were speaking to me because I wasn't tuned in and paying attention. Unless I was laser focused on the conversation, usually I wouldn't really pick up that they were talking to me. But I'll admit, now that still happens, but not as much. And I found that if I am trying to read something or focus on something else while there are other people talking in Spanish around me, it's not as easy to tune out. I get distracted more easily because I can actually understand what they're saying without having to be laser focused on what they're saying. So it's automatically just entering my brain and I can actually understand some of the things they're saying, so it's not just mindless chatter or background noise. So it's harder to focus if I want to read something while there's talking going on in the background, even if it's in Spanish. So that's the second way I realized, wow, I guess I'm becoming fluent, because without even thinking or paying that much attention, I'm still understanding and hearing words. Just like if it were English, I would be understanding everything, so it'd be very hard to focus. So now it's just not as easy to tune things out, especially if people are talking as loud as Dominicans do. It's not easy to tune out and focus on my own thing. The third way I knew I was becoming fluent is that I can focus on someone speaking in Spanish for longer amounts of time than before. Here I go to church, and obviously they have sermons at church, which are a pretty lengthy amount of time to sit down and listen to one person talking, especially in a language that is not your first language. But with time, it's become easier and easier for me to focus on the sermon and to actually understand the whole thing rather than just zoning out like I was mentioning earlier. In Honduras, I found myself getting distracted more easily from the sermons because I was sitting there for such a long time, and it was very difficult to stay as focused as I needed to be able to understand. And I found that if I listened to Spanish for too long, I just couldn't help but tune it out because it was a lot of mental work to constantly be trying to focus so hard and understand the message. But now that just doesn't happen to me as much. I know this could be also due to different pastors' preaching styles, which is a valid point, but I would say the pastors in Honduras and the ones here have a pretty equivalent, or at least comparable, preaching style, so it's not too much based on that. I would say it is more due to my management of the language. The fourth way I knew I was becoming fluent is saying como less and less and less with time. Especially, I mentioned this in a video I did in Spanish, but especially with new people or with people who I'm just meeting for the first time, maybe in a colmado, in the supermarket or whatever. Now, I don't have to say that as much because I understand them the first time. It's not like a shock when they're speaking to me in Spanish, something I didn't expect them to say. Yes, I still say that a fair amount, but not as much as the beginning, which was like 2 times for every one thing that someone said to me. Now it's not as much, thankfully. So I chalk that up to improvement with the language. Number 5 also has to do with number 4, and that is that it's easier to understand strangers. I mentioned this in my video I did in Spanish, which I will link above, but it's easier to understand strangers because I'm not comfortable with just the few people I talk in Spanish with. I can actually understand a wide variety of different people. I can actually understand the language and not just that one person I speak Spanish with, or those 3 people I speak Spanish with. So it's not as hard to understand, whether it be the cashier at the grocery store, or meeting someone new, or a new coworker. It's not as hard to understand them because I am more comfortable with the language and not only comfortable with just the people I speak the language with. The 6th reason is being able to understand different abbreviations or different slang that people have. In school, I always read academic style Spanish, so then when I come here and there are people messaging with different abbreviations in text, at first that was very confusing, but I can say that now that I am understanding it and managing the language better, that is definitely not as hard for me anymore. So I would say that that is an improvement more on the writing and reading side of the language. Most of the other things I've been talking about have been the listening or the speaking side, but that's one way I knew at least my writing and reading skills were getting better and more natural, because obviously if you are reading academic style Spanish, you might be finding words you don't understand, but text abbreviations can help you develop that writing style that is still useful, and that's just another way to develop your language skills, to understand text abbreviations. So that was the 6th way. Number 7 is understanding and even sending voice messages in Spanish. I used to be really afraid of these because I was so scared of not understanding, because that was my weakest skill, as I mentioned again in the same video I did in Spanish. But now I even send them because speaking and listening has become more natural for me, which I really feel has been the biggest improvement from living in Spanish-speaking countries, just the listening and the speaking aspects, because in school I learned a lot with reading and writing, but now I've got that more natural practice with listening and speaking. So those are the 7 ways that I realized I was becoming fluent in Spanish. Now, let me talk about calling myself fluent in Spanish. For a while, I've been scared to call myself fluent. This is mainly just because I'm a perfectionist and I feel like I need to know 100% of the language before I can label myself as fluent. But really, this fear just comes down to I didn't want to be that token Spanish speaker and people just turn to you to translate whatever word, whatever situation, whatever phrase they see, and then there's a word I don't know and I don't know it. I'm like, oh, well, I'm supposed to be fluent. I didn't want to feel that pressure. So I was like, let me just not call myself fluent. I'll tell people I'm getting there or whatever. But now making videos in Spanish, I feel like I can confidently, that's not a very confident face, but I feel like I can confidently call myself fluent, or at least getting very close. And if you are learning a language and you feel like you are getting pretty good at it, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why you shouldn't be afraid to call yourself fluent in that language. The first reason is that different accents, even in your own language, can be difficult to understand. There are different slangs from different countries that you might not even be aware of. And I'm sure many people in the US or people from Australia or England have come to the US and listened to, I don't know, a southern speaker or someone from a different region and not understood very much of what they're saying, because there are different dialects, there are different accents, and those can be difficult to understand in your own language. So don't be too hard on yourself for not understanding or knowing all the different dialects or accents of the language you're learning. For example, in my case, in Spanish, I can't tell the difference between that many different accents, but it's okay, because even in English there are different accents, different words that different countries use that can make it difficult to understand. So that shouldn't be a reason that you stop yourself from feeling like you're fluent in the language. Number 2 is that you don't speak with perfect grammar in your own language. I've noticed that, especially as I've been making videos and editing them, I'm listening to myself sometimes saying, what? Was that even a complete sentence? But it's just natural to not necessarily speak in a full sentence with a nice period or a nice punctuation mark at the end. So you really don't have to feel bad about yourself for not speaking in perfect grammar all the time, because even in our own languages, I know I don't speak in perfect grammar all the time, and I'm an English teacher, and I'm sure you don't either. Especially with writing, we can use run-on sentences all the time. I know I do that when I'm texting a story to someone, so don't feel bad about messing up the grammar sometimes in the language you're learning. The 3rd reason is that you don't know every single word in your own language. Not only do we not know every single word in the dictionary that we currently use in this moment of time, but think about all the words that have either gone extinct or just people don't use anymore from the past, and then all the words that people will create in the future, whether they be slang words or whatever else. We don't know all these words in our own language. That's why people still study vocabulary. So don't be afraid to call yourself fluent just because you don't know all the words. It's okay. You can always learn them, just like you can always still learn vocabulary in your native language. So if you come to a word that maybe you know how to say in your first language, but you don't know how to say in your second language, and it's absolutely necessary to the conversation, communication, you can always do things like trying to describe it or trying to use other words and just trying to make the person understand, because at the end of the day, that's really what language is all about, just making someone understand you. And if you can do that, I would say you are pretty fluent in the language that you are speaking. So basically, I'm telling you or myself not to be perfectionist when it comes to learning a language, because it's something that is always changing, always evolving. New words are always coming up, new ways of speaking are always coming up. So don't feel too bad. Don't be too much of a perfectionist when it comes to calling yourself fluent in your second language, your third language, whatever language you may be learning. Because after all, a language is not about knowing every single thing or being correct all the time. It's just about communicating with other people. And if you can communicate, then I would say you're fluent. Communication obviously gets messy. People have their own voices. People have their own ways of speaking. There's no way for you to manufacture the perfect situation for you to practice and become fluent. But what you can do is just get out there and try. Get out there and start speaking and listening to people in the language you're trying to learn. That brings us to the conclusion of today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And if you're learning a language, I hope this helped you. Let me know in the comments below, what is your first language? What is your second language? What language are you trying to learn? Once again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.